In this video, there are two primary objectives that I want to accomplish. The first one is I want to challenge my own government on the UAP issue. And I want to do so respectfully and in a friendly tone, because that's how we should always challenge our government. And I think if we're not challenging our government as citizens, maybe we should be more proactive in doing so when the situation calls for it. And that should be interesting, and that will be a little bit later in the video. The second primary objective that I want to accomplish is that I want to address the question of whether or not skeptics are treating the UAP subject in a way that is at all problematic, which is not to say that I'm proclaiming that UAP quote unquote believers are not causing any problems, but that would be a different issue for another time and something I've addressed in the past. And I will center that question around a interview that occurred on November 11th between Mick West and Zach Saichi of Project Human podcast, which is now on hiatus. So without further ado, even though I hate that saying, but it gets the message across, let's jump right into it. In the following clip, Zach defends Mick West and asserts that there's nothing he's doing to harm what I would interpret as the UAP discussion.
I actually say there's nothing this guy can do to harm us. He is literally, what do? You debunk things and you say, yeah, you try to debunk things, and then you give a list in order of likelihood of what things probably are versus probably not. There's nothing you can do to harm any of us, and I appreciate what you do, and there's nothing that you can do other than force me to ask better, sharper questions and to, try to better understand like ways to sort of reframe the conversation to get closer to something like a productive conversation.
Now, to address this question, I'm going to share with you some statements made by a good friend of mine named Finn Hanley. We talk a lot about the UFO issue, and in my subjective opinion, he is one of the finest analysts on this subject that I've ever come across. Now, bear in mind that I asked Finn how he perceives skeptics cause issues for the UAP subject. And this was his answer right off the cuff. So he didn't put a whole lot of time into thinking about it. He just responded to my question, and I transcribed it. And Finn is an experiencer. He claims that he saw two orbs that turned into two triangular-shaped vehicles, and his experience is not unusual within the UFO historical record. There have been many claims of UAP changing shape in that way. But let's go right into his answer to the question of whether or not skeptics have caused any issues for the UAP discussion subject. I think the skeptics do harm to this, but in a very subtle way. It's because they're constantly there with their mantras, right? With saying stuff like, it's more likely that Fravor saw a bird, and then a balloon, and then a bird again, and then a reflection, than aliens, because aliens are unlikely. Those kind of mantras are damaging because they're untrue. They're based on guesswork. They are not based on science, and they lead people into a trap of thinking we know more than we do. They lead people into this trap of a kind of arrogant, assumptive mindset where it's just, well, it's probably not aliens, so I'm just going to ignore it, when in fact, everything is pointing toward the fact that it's something akin to aliens, and this leads to a kind of apathy that we have for the subject. That is the most damaging thing that the skeptics bring to this, is they really contribute to a general feeling of apathy among those people who haven't got time to do their homework, who just accept what the skeptics are saying, which is, if these pilots are just idiots and these Pentagon people are just fanatics, and it's all just a people problem, then I haven't got time for this you-know-what, so I'm just going to walk away from it. So when Avi Loeb starts his project, he's fighting against decades of conditioning from people like deGrasse Tyson, who act on the news when they're told about ATIP, when they're asked about ATIP for their scientific stance on this, They just say, it's boring. Tell me when you've got a dinner invitation from an alien. So the intellectuals who are watching that news show can't be bothered to do their homework and will just follow his lead like the Pied Piper. And so they'll go and tell all their clever friends, there's nothing to this. Come talk to me when one of these alleged abductees actually manages to grab one of the alien ashtrays. It has led to a bizarre, delusional approach to this subject where people are just like, well, show me any alien and then I'll be interested. That is ridiculous and it's unscientific.
I'm fine. We don't know what it is. Keep checking it out.
Okay, but hold on a second. There's another question.
Call me when you have dinner invite from an alien.
That's a
different
you're
conversation.
skeptical.
I want to share a few tweets from Mick West just to make his position crystal clear. Not that I really even need to share these tweets, because if you follow his work, it becomes unavoidable that he's almost or extremely close to certain that UAP represent nothing but low information zone and too far away, and not a potential for alien artifacts. He's near zero on that possibility. But let's just go over these tweets real quick. Mick West on October 25th said, UAPs could be aliens, but then he gives greater clarity on what he means. I think the likelihood of any UAPs, UFOs being alien is vanishingly small, and there's no significant indications that any might be. But I also think it's important to remind people that you can't actually 100% eliminate the possibility, so it should be on the table in perspective. UFO News Network Sunday writes, you wrote vanishing small, as in the likelihood was once greater and is now vanishing. That's how I read it. Mick West replies, sorry, I meant to type vanishingly small, which just means so small as to be insignificant or undetectable. I should have just said almost zero. So me and Finn would both agree that Mick West takes on an extremist approach to UAP. And while we both give him credit for listening to people, I mean, he brings people on his show, such as Dietrich, one of the aviators from the Nimitz event, or Voorhees, one of the radar technicians with the Spy 1 from the Nimitz event. The thing about it is which both me and Finn agree on, is that he listens with a filter. He assumes that all of this, no matter how it's presented, no matter who presents it, no matter how much corroboration, no matter how many sightings or how many corroborated sightings, his filter translates to, I hear what you're saying, thank you for telling me, but still, there's almost no chance that what you saw, perceived, or experienced is aliens. And I don't think that's objective. And the obvious rebuttal would be, but don't believers do the same thing? And my answer would be, yes, they do. And I would challenge them not to do that. See, I believe there is a spectrum of reasonable interpretation on this phenomenon being of alien origin. And it would be the two extremes that I would say I can't get on board with, whether it's the skeptic like Mick West, who gives it basically a 1 in a million chance, or it's the believer who's like, I'm 100%. I would not resonate with that, or close to 100% with the believer. I would not resonate with that. And when people ask me where I am on that spectrum, what I tell them is I'm over 50% that some UAP represent non-human in technology, but I don't go beyond that simply because does it even matter? We're dealing with a mystery. If the scientific community gave even just a 1% odds that one UAP in the history of the world that a human has experienced is of non-human intelligence, they would be a lot more interested in this subject than they present. And so my argument is the world is not responding to this enigma in an appropriate and proportional way. And also, I have a fluid mind. So I can't tell you an exact figure. My brain is fluid. It's not nailed down in that way, but I am willing to go so far to say I'm over 50%. And I'm not going to say what's the most rational take and what's not. I mean, that's really subjective. But I think what's less subjective, at least to me, is making the statement that the two extremes are too far. When you actually take an honest look at the UFO historical record, And the one exception I would give, and I would apply this to Finn, is I could understand if someone had, and let me emphasize this as much as I can, an unambiguous sighting, I could understand how they would be 100%. And that's how Finn is. And that's how someone like David Fravor is, by the way. Which, let me remind everyone, when Finn had his sighting, when David Fravor had his sighting, the skeptics weren't there. And yet, some of them, like Mick West, will still maintain, and he will say, I don't care that I wasn't there. My assessment is there's almost nearing a 0% chance that you experience anything really weird. It was probably a balloon, or a F-18 off in the distance, or a canopy reflection, or whatever soup du jour the skeptic in question has. And Finn has shared with me that he has talked about his sighting with Mick, and Mick told Finn, you can't possibly know that you saw what you say you saw. And that's, I don't want to curse because YouTube doesn't like it, but you know what that is. It is possible he knows what he saw, just like it's possible that Alex Dietrich and David Fravor know what they saw. And other witnesses throughout history, yes, that's possible. Or how about one of my favorites, Dr. Bob Jacobs, who says he saw a flying saucer-looking object rotate around a warhead at the edge of space at 8,000 miles an hour when Major Mansman brought him into his office to review the film that he took 2 days earlier. So this mantra, as Finn has cited, that's the problem with some skeptics in the modern age, is they have this mantra that they promote, and some people buy into it hook, line, and sinker, and then as a consequence, they don't even bother looking into the historical record because the skeptics have promoted this idea that there's a near 0% chance. Now, here's the problem. If that is a faulty, illogical perspective, then how can it be argued that they're not promoting a faulty interpretation of the mystery we're dealing with? So, referencing the earlier passage of Finn regarding his assertion that Mick West's analysis of UAP is ultimately not based on science, but is more based on guesswork, this is what Finn anticipates Mick would say in response to his assertion regarding that. I think Mick would respond saying, well, it's not guesswork, it is science. It is based on science. And my argument, that is Finn's argument, is it's a little more complicated than just saying it's not science. It's based on woefully inadequate science with not enough information. Mick talks about the low information zone. We live in the low information zone. Our science exists in the low information zone. Everything that we learn is like, okay, so we've mastered some things in science. We know some things 100%. When it comes to exploring space with science, we're still in the low information zone. So to be saying something is likely or unlikely, alien visitation is unlikely because it's so far away or because we haven't seen them, that's low information assumptions, and he doesn't like people making low information assumptions when it comes to photographs of UFOs or videos. But he's fine to do it when it comes to just pure guesswork. You know, I'm not going to lie. I am a fanboy of Dr. Avi Loeb. I think he's an exceptional critical thinker, and I think he challenges a lot of the mantras that comes out of the scientific community. And he is the perfect person to head the first long-term systematic investigation into UAP. And so this is objectively just that. And since science has never really looked into UAP adequately, then none of us can really have the justified confidence that people like Mick West have, in my opinion, that all the UAPs that people claim they have seen are 1 in a million that they're alien artifacts. I don't think that's justified. Certainly not at this stage. And regarding the challenge I was going to make to my government regarding UAP, I'm going to give you a very truncated version because this video is running a little long, and I think that it'd be a better idea if I continue that with a follow-up. So you probably don't want to forget to subscribe if that appeals to you. But so here is my challenge in a nutshell. The US government has proclaimed multiple times in the past that they have no evidence that we're being engaged by non-human intelligence or that they're detecting technology that is far beyond known technology. I can point to 2 incidences where they did that. They did that in 2011 in response to a petition. The White House did that. And there's a fact sheet that the United States Air Force put forth at the close of Project Blue Book that did that. And there probably are multiple other instances when they've done that. So my challenge to my government is basically that I'm going to assert the prediction that they will never again come down on this subject the way they did in the past, which doesn't make a lot of sense, because if there was ever a time to come down on the perspective that some UAP might be beyond known technology of unknown origin, this would probably be the time. So it's going to be somewhat of a provocative prediction, but in a respectful way. And I hope you join me for that in the next video. So don't forget to subscribe. If you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my merch shop. You could become a patron, a YouTube member. You can give me a one-time donation, or you could just slap a like on this bad boy and I'll appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Special thanks to all YouTube members, patrons, those who have bought merch, those who give me a one-time donation, and those who watch the video all the way through. Thank you so much. Couldn't do it without you.